Yeah, I love it. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, first and foremost for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here and just have this forum to chat and share our stories.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. So, before we started filming here, we were talking about where we first met, which was the All In conference in September. As we were saying, it was both humbling and exciting at the same time. There were so many amazing speakers, amazing guests, folks that were way smarter than I could ever even imagine of being, and also met some really cool people like yourself. And so, we'll be curious from your seat, and obviously there was a custom athletic brewing all in beer that they had at the session, but would be curious how you got plugged into the all in guys in the first place and can go from there.
Yeah, wet your beak, right?
Exactly.
Unfortunately, I don't have one with me today, but I do have my favorite Rin Wild. So we'll start off the conversation with a nice crack of a cold one.
Love it.
But yeah, no, Athletic really got in. It was a connection through our founder Bill Schufelt, who's just been a huge fan of the pod for a long time, and we got in as a sponsor, and to really just start, getting engaged in that community, and started to get athletics name out with such a high profile group. It's just a tremendous fit, obviously across so many different verticals. So our founder comes from the financial world, and there's just obviously a lot of folks in that space that attend those conferences. So I think started off there really authentically, and then even just having folks like David Friedberg really authentically, speak to the brand and his passion for it, his fanship for it, just seemed like a natural fit. So it was just honestly really rewarding to be there and represent for Athletic, and then just get to not only help with some of the sponsorship elements, but just to be in that room and listen and learn.
So cool. Well, I know this is the Adam show today. I want to learn more about you and your background, but I want to double click onto athletic for a second. For those just on audio, Adam's got a beautiful athletic brewing surfboard on his backdrop there, which is wicked. But this is the most kind of typical framing of a story here. But I was in the sauna, and there always are these random newspapers from Wall Street Journal articles from days prior, and I picked one up, and it was the story of the athletic brewing team and how they got started. And I'd love to just hear your narrative on the story of athletic brewing. Were the guys at DE Shaw? Is that what they spun out of to start athletic brewing, or where did they come from?
Yeah, it's actually a really incredible story, and I probably won't even do it justice. And it's a timely that we're having this conversation on this platform, because actually just released this week was an incredible "How I Built This" episode with Bill Schufelt, our CEO and co-founder, and it talks about all the formative years, and really Bill's journey and meeting John Walker, our co-founder, and their story for really incubating Athletic Brewing, which is now, 6 years later, only 6 years later, the number one non-alcoholic brewery in the country, and in the top 10 craft breweries by volume. So pretty incredible entrepreneurial story, and successful business growth story in a relatively short period of time. Um, so I probably not going to do it justice, but Bill, an incredible visionary, incredible leader. It really started from an authentic place in his life as he, was approaching 30, got married, was in the financial world, worked for a really prominent hedge fund, and was just living that high performance life where, he was investing deeply in his career, working 12, 14-hour days, going out to work dinners, entertaining clients, and then socializing on the weekend, training for, fun 5Ks or half marathons. And like the common denominator within that, are really the only thing that was kind of holding back from 100% battery and like full potential was alcohol. So he made a lifestyle decision, in that time frame, probably around, maybe it was, I don't want to quote the year, but maybe 2013 or so. And it was really, Bill's own life that kind of this need, or the lack thereof options, kind of had that light bulb moment. So he talks about that quite a bit in How I Built This, and just the support and the backing and the push from his wife to really help him in that journey of business planning and cultivating the brand and the model. But guy had incredible, financial background and aptitude for, building a long-term strategic plan for the business. So, Yeah, it's incredible to hear his own story from his own voice, and then ultimately a lot of the adversity he faced, and a lot of the naysayers and the folks that didn't believe in this category because honestly, it didn't have a lot of innovation or any sort of momentum behind it for 30 plus years, which is where the opportunity was. And he met John Walker, our co-founder, after over 200 or so brewers didn't answer an email or a phone call from him, and it really kind of birthed an incredible journey and an incredible brand story.
Yeah, it's so relevant, and so I really resonate with where he's coming from. Just being in my day job and having conferences to travel to and different events and going out multiple days a week for work, and then you have the weekends and there's social components to keep up with, and ordering a club soda at whatever restaurant or bar you go to doesn't necessarily. I feel like now the stigma's gone down because of groups like Athletic doing what you're doing. But over the last couple of years, it's gotten easier and easier because of the NA beverages, like what you guys are putting together. I'd love to understand better how you first got introduced to Athletic Brewing and how that tied into your or how you got tied into that group as well. So maybe starting with that, how did you first hear about or get introduced to Athletic Brewing?
Yeah, for sure. Similar to Bill in many ways, it started with me quitting drinking and just having really authentically drawn to the brand. So I'll take it back to my story. So I grew up in the Midwest, and I was ingrained in that culture of just you go to college, you graduate, you get a corporate job, you work to climb the corporate ladder. You put your time in, you put your savings in the 401k, and then you look towards retirement, right? There just kind of was this like typical track. And I coming out of college, I moved to downtown Chicago. My wife and I met young in college, so we were both together from an early stage, just living that downtown life. We both were investing in our careers. I've always been in sales, but I was not in the beer industry. I started off my career in software sales and was accelerating in that. Pivoted to the production world and doing more live event work, but always in the sales side. And it was a lot of just working downtown or traveling. Similar to what I mentioned with Bill, obviously a different sector in the financial world, but just client dinners, entertaining, and then the social scene in Chicago was very much a drinking culture. You'd go out for happy hours, you'd go out on the weekends, you'd have a lot of friends that were in walking distance in the wonderful neighborhoods, and the dynamic of Chicago, the great food scene, the great sports culture. So I was in this dynamic in my 20s of really just like hitting it hard on career, kind of working that cycle where you just bust it Monday through Friday, and then you really kind of live for those off hours and those weekend hours. And drinking was too much included in that, I would say. And I just found myself as I was approaching 30. I'd been married to my wife at that point just a couple years. And I really just started to reflect and say, is this really like me? Is this really the life that I want to be living? I felt a little like I was putting my face on in the corporate world. I felt like some of the excessive drinking was just, it wasn't worth it. Whether it was a light hangover the next day or an aggressive hangover the next day, or it was at a company outing and just was too much for that environment, or it was just holding me back from some personal goals and fitness. And I've always been into running and things like that. So I really just started to do this like internal reflection and started to kind of say like what's really not me, and how do I like rewire back to like what is really me. And so that was a couple things. That was lifestyle changes. So I decided to quit drinking for a month, and that was October 2016, 8 years ago. And I just said, hey, I'm not going to put too many things out there and like try to think too long term or daunting. I've been drinking my entire adult life, but I said I'm going to start there, make some of those changes. And I had no intentions of flipping my career on its head. I'd worked hard at that point, over a decade in my previous industries. Um, but I just started to like think and open up my view to other options. And with that, I just started to have more time. When you're not drinking, naturally, more time, more presence, more sharpness is there. So I started to channel that into different passions, right? And I didn't know what it would be, but I just knew that there was more out there for me. So in my free time, the time that I did have outside of my, industry at the time, I just started to, engage more in the fitness world. I started to engage more in things that I was passionate about. And early in that sober journey for me, I didn't really miss the alcohol as much because I felt like the performance, my sleep performance, my health performance, my job performance, my marriage, everything was an A grade, feeling that way by all measures. So I wanted to stick with that. But I just wanted to start to put my feelers into different things that were interesting me at the time, maybe manifesting something, longer term. And what I did miss, didn't miss the alcohol. What I did miss was a great tasting beer, right? And so I literally, Binny's was as a liquor store, pretty famous one in the Chicagoland area. And I remember that fall, late fall of 2016, I would literally go there and buy every option there was. There was, typically the green bottles that we all know that have been collecting dust, and, usually weren't that great tasting, to some of the European options that were there. And I just remember like I'd come home from the store and I'd have a few different six packs and I'd look at my wife and I'd be like, I'm feeling good. I feel healthy about this journey, but I'm missing something. I'm missing a great tasting alternative or a great tasting beer. I've always been a beer guy. And so I literally tried every option. I was even spending like $60 to ship stuff in from the UK, just because I was almost obsessed. I'm like, there's got to be something out there. There's got to be more people like me. So I started developing this uber curiosity about the category. And I felt like as a young professional in my early 30s at that point, there had to be thousands of more people that were making lifestyle changes like me. But how was there no options for those people, right? So in my free time, I just started to really like dive into the category. I started to look at like global trends and seeing that in Spain or France, non-alc beer was 7 to 8% of total beer category versus in the US, it was less than 0.5%, right? So there were some trends happening globally. I was starting to see some like new blood in the NA beer category. So I felt like there was this like shift culturally. And then there was also some new new heat, new blood coming to the space, timing up really with my journey. So long story short, I just really started to develop a passion for it, and I just started to kind of put one foot in front of the other. Again, no real aspirations to flip my career on its head. I had no idea where it would go, but I just had this burning sense in me of just saying, hey, connect with people in this space. Maybe write some blog articles on it. And it seemed to really resonate. And I was developing really good connections, networking with people that were doing online e-commerce, selling NA products because you could do that DTC. So I would connect with people that were looking at like unified platforms online. I would connect with people that were, sober individuals in my community that just were like-minded. And honestly, it just was kind of a snowball of like a really manifestation of where it ultimately got me. But really, it was in that space that athletic brewing popped up on my radar through that research and through that exercise. And this was early in the days where they launched in 2018, and they had their brews available online through their e-commerce channel, and I had this beer delivered to me, and far and above blew anything else ever that I've had, even rivaling, alcoholic craft beers I was always a fan of or put on a pedestal. So this beer, Run Wild, hate to sound so deep or cheesy, but it really changed my life. So right then and there, and then just really like the ethos of the company, the mission, the authenticity, being solely dedicated to NA and really being aspirational, like not really being, just targeting that sober individual. It was really looking at like how can we break NA beer into the mainstream and take down stigma walls. So there was just so much I identified with, and I remember at that time looking at my wife being like, this is the beer that could change the world. This is the company that I will work for one day. And, I just kind of went on a chase. I've always been a sales guy, and would like to say I'm, can be persistent at times if I'm passionate about it. And I reached out to Bill Schufeld, our CEO and co-founder. This was like early 2019. And I just said, hey, I got no agenda, but I'm going to be in New York for business, and I would love to just sit down with you. I pinged him a few times. The guy's busy, but he was incredibly generous with his time for a guy he owed nothing to, and really a nobody that lived in Chicago. We sat down at a bar in the Lower East Side and just got to know one another. And what was so cool about that is we really just shared stories and shared common interests for this category and common passion. And again, no real agenda coming out of that. And so it was really just a good connection. I got a chance to see the brewery that same weekend. I happened to have my stay in town a couple more days. So I got exposure at the original Stratford facility. And from there, I kept in touch and just kind of every now and then would shoot a note, how's business development going? What are your forward thinking plans? And I just tried to stay out in front of it. But at that point, athletic was, still relatively, in its infancy, right? And so it was a while, several months, the better part of a year until things really took shape and it became like a real opportunity and one that, again, uprooted my life in Chicago, uprooted my entire family's life for the better. So it's wild.
Such an awesome story, man, and appreciate you walking through that. I think so many people can resonate with what you outlined of, finding a brand through rigorous search that aligns so much with what they're looking for in whatever category that might be. But a lot of people don't go that extra mile of, giving flowers to the founders or the people who are running those businesses where they're due, and let alone with no agenda. That's the big piece. I think the authentic nature of just wanted to connect with someone that was building something super cool is really neat. And obviously it's paid back dividends to you and your life, both professionally and personally. But super cool. And then from your time initially meeting on the Lower East Side to starting with Athletic Brewing, that was what, a year turnaround, or how you said it was about a couple months of going back and forth?
Yeah, it was the better part of 2019. So I believe we met in early June of 2019, and things didn't really kind of take shape until like the end of that year. That's when Bill and John made a major investment into the San Diego facility. So they had what I thought at the time was a big brewery, and turned out to be pretty small in Stratford, Connecticut, given the scale that and the growth that we were going to go through. But yeah, we met in June of 2019, stayed in touch for a better part of 6 months, and it was that winter, December, January, that we talked about the opportunity and the expansion westward, and really what that would look like for me and for the company. And yeah, it was ultimately February of 2020 that got an opportunity and ended up moving my family cross country from Chicago to we live now in Carlsbad, just north of our brewery here in San Diego. So it was a huge lifestyle change, a massive uproot, just in terms of my career and industry and what I had known, family and just community, everything I had known in Chicago, to, the lifestyle and the opportunity with athletic on the West Coast. So I've been here, almost 5 years at this point.
Now, that's obviously a crazy pivot from the SaaS sales world to the beer industry, let alone non-alcoholic beer industry. As you mentioned, you grew up in the Midwest. I saw you went to Arizona State, which is a, party school that everyone knows. I went to Virginia Tech, so is Virginia Tech. It's kind of in your blood, as you mentioned, just kind of growing up where you did. And I know you interned for the White Sox too. And so sports and that collegial fraternal environment is just kind of in your DNA from an early age, it seems. And then having a steady career in tech sales, making that jump cross country, making that move cross country, let alone right before the pandemic really launched or really kicked off globally. What was that like? Did you ever have like a oh crap moment in March 2020 when things were shutting down? Walk me through what that was like for you and your family as you were just transplanted and were getting settled on the West Coast, and then things start shutting down. What was that like for you guys?
Yeah, it was definitely a wild time in our world. A wild time, certainly. I think everyone can probably think back to where they were in that time, and just everyone's got different stories and careers that were uprooted, businesses that worked or didn't work. So I certainly can reflect a lot on what transpired in those in that critical period. But going back to real quick what you were saying about Arizona State, it's funny, when I was going to school there, I loved the reputation of a party school. But now that I'm older, I don't love that reputation. I wish it was an academic reputation. It's funny how things change, but every time I say I went to Arizona State, people that never leaves. So that's a reputation that has existed for decades. But no, too funny. I think yeah, it was a massive change, but I think I was so excited for it, and it felt so right. And the reason I say that is, kind of going back to what I was talking about. I grew up in the Midwest. I lived the majority of my life in Chicago and in Cincinnati, and it was I love the Midwest, and Chicago will always be in my heart as home. But I think as I was talking about like undoing pieces of me, I felt like when I was in that rat race of just kind of checking the box in the corporate world, trying to get that next promotion, um, I always felt like I was missing a sense of like true passion and purpose in my livelihood. We spend so much time, at our day jobs and what we're doing, and life is short and nothing is promised. And I just always had that like deep thinking sense where I would go to bed at night. I'm like, is this really what I'm doing for 8, 12 hours a day? And I always found passions in what I was selling or companies that I was a part of, but I just never fully felt it, right? And I think it's a special thing when people pursue something or are able to find something where they can really marry what they're skilled at, like what their professional strengths are, what they can be paid for, right? You got to make a living, and what can make like a true difference in the world, and like what lights you up, like where is that purpose and passion for you, and like marrying all three of those elements is not easy to do. And I always had a desire to do that, but how was I going to get there? And so when all of this kind of transpired with like me being in some dark times in my life, quitting drinking and not necessarily seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and then one foot in front of the other of like feeling healthy and finding excitement and joy in NA beer, and then this whole kind of movement that was happening and connecting with really inspirational people like Bill, it started to feel like there was maybe something there, right? And so when it all came and there was an opportunity ultimately, um, and like what more beautiful thing to have that opportunity be in a location that is just screams lifestyle,
Right, right.
just sunshine and surfing and just health and wellness culture is at its core of San Diego. And that, coming from a Midwest guy, that was always just this like desired state, right? So I'm like, man, this transformation is just such a beautiful thing because it took a really challenging, adverse time in my life, um, and challenging time for my wife and my family, to this beautiful, like more passion, more impact, able to bring skill set to something that really checked all those boxes, and in a location that could just cultivate a really special lifestyle. So I say all that because your question was about what was going through my head in that transition. Like it was certainly a lot of tumultuous things happening in the world at that time. And while it felt, risky, right? The company was less than 50 people at the time. It was, quote unquote startup mode. And I had left really like sustainable job and company and industry, and so that felt very risky, but everything felt so right, right? And I just didn't
Yeah.
question it for a second. And so, on the car on the way out here with our two dogs, and we were all in. The pandemic brought a whole lot of other changes for outside of that, that were unexpected, but it felt very right, and it was very exciting.
I'm going to pull up an image here and then I want to talk about your point on feeling. But are you familiar with the Japanese concept of ikigai, the alignment of the reason for being?
That's 100% where I pulled that from,
Yeah.
and 100% probably the most influential book I've read. And I there you go, right there.
It's so good. It's so good. It's for those on audio, it's aligning your passion, your mission, your vocation, and your profession. And I think it does a good job picturing, or I guess building a picture of what Adam was talking about finding things that align with what you care about, with what you're good at, with what's in your core for what you're actually passionate about, and then also what you can do making a living. So yeah, I fully subscribe to that as well, and I just wanted to. I thought that's where you were pulling it from, but I just wanted to validate.
I've sent that book to a few friends and people that are just, wrestling with where they want to be, or there's obviously a ton of self-help books out there, a ton of leadership books out there, but that one just from like a place of, perspective and outlook on life. That was my wife that gave that to me as a gift. And really through that time of my life, that initial period of sobriety and really thinking about that and trying to, really blaze my own trail. That was a really influential piece of it.
Yeah, and you were mentioning a couple of things about it feeling right, a lot of intuition types of words that were in your vernacular there when you were talking about making that jump. I think one thing I know in my journey, I guess it was first quarter of last year of 2023 when I just, I decided, hey, I don't need to go and drink at all these work events, at all of these happy hours, at these parties. I can just go and have a club soda. I wish I would have, been more exposed to athletic brewing at the time, so I would have been able to fit in more. But at that point, when I was turning down drinking and waking up more clear, having a better, I guess, just picture on my day. Like, I guess the clarity is the biggest piece in what you're saying around. I wrote down 3 points you mentioned earlier. You said you have more time back, you're more present, you're more sharp, which I fully align with. Waking up and having more time in the mornings or evenings, being more present when you are awake because you're at your absolute baseline, and then the
Totally.
sharpness that you have. All of that in my head allows you to tap into your gut, tap into your intuition to understand what you're really supposed to be doing. And I don't think that I was able to, and that's around the same time when I started the podcast. I don't think I would have been able to get there had I not turned down my drinking habits, which not that I had an issue, but just, socially going to work, like I said earlier, work things, weekends, whatever, like you were mentioning. And so all that's to say, I think you get so much clarity from that journey of sobriety that you mentioned. It fully aligns with me, and that sharpness that you get to allow you to make those decisions, because you can actually hear your gut when you're not just trying to make it to the next day or make it to the next weekend.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, really, the most important thing I've ever done in my life personally, and I'm not on a soapbox preaching sobriety, because I
Yeah.
think one of the beautiful things that athletic does so well is, we've broken into the mainstream in a sense that, we are a beer for any and all walk of life. We're beer for drinkers and non-drinkers. In fact, 85% of our consumers drink alcohol, and I think the beautiful thing about breaking into drinkers and non-drinkers is the fact that you can really just have it to where somebody's holding this in a restaurant and it's not, oh, you're drinking an NA or you're drinking a 6% ABV. It's just you're drinking a great tasting craft beer,
Yeah.
right? And I think normalizing that is the way to truly make like disruptive, massive change, versus if you really are just looking at speaking to the AA audience or the sober audience, which I have tremendous respect for, and really I'm a part of that, like hyper sobriety subgroup. Um, but if you're just speaking to that, you're really going to limit the impact you could truly make by exposing yourself to everyday alcohol drinkers. So for us, what's amazing is that the athletic brand and the quality of the liquid itself is being adopted into people's drinking habits, right? So they can be completely sober, they can take 30 days off or do a dry January, or maybe they're just drinking athletic during the week or flexing in and out of their weekly routines, and still maybe drinking alcohol or wine, spirits, whatever on the weekends. So I think it's just being additive to the overall environment, and really focused on where we can fit well within the right occasions for people's life is really important.
It's hard to talk about sobriety or individual sober or sobriety journeys without sounding like you had a problem before. And it's funny, I can't remember who said this quote or who I heard the quote from initially, but it's alcohol is the only drug that if you don't consume it, people look at you funny.
Very true. And I
And,
had
go
many of
ahead,
those
please.
moments. No, I had many of those moments like early on, because right now, especially in some of these more progressive areas like a Southern California, the idea of not drinking or, ordering a mocktail is kind of part of the scene now, which is a beautiful thing. And it's what companies like Athletic have paved the way for. But, when I quit drinking, and this wasn't that long ago, it was very unusual, and being in a restaurant scene or at a client work dinner and everyone's, ordering the wine or ordering cocktails and, you're like, oh, I'll just take a water or a club soda. You get that raised eyebrow, and it's one of those like connected things where people feel like, oh, you're not drinking? Why not? And it's just like, it's just been there. Right. And so, that's one of the beautiful things about athletic is we're able to break those walls down, and that awkwardness can go away, and that's changed dramatically over the years. But there were certainly those moments where I was just like, man, I felt so isolated, and unfortunately, you had the original NA beers with the green label on them. You'd get those question marks if you're drinking one, and it's not the case now with something like this.
Yeah. I think your point on normalization is really well taken, in which there's kind of two beautiful secular tailwinds that I think are going to continue to help athletic grow, which is one that I think it's become more normal to turn down that glass of wine or to order the athletic at an event because it's just more people are aware of it and it's more just socialized. But two, I think with all of the wearables, I wear my Whoop everywhere. People have Aura rings, whatever your wearable of choice might be, with the wearables, with people like Andrew Huberman that are talking about the benefits of sobriety and all of these mindset, motivation, athletic and wellness influencers that are out there talking about their respective sober journeys. I think that both of those two things, helping to normalize turning down that social glass of whatever or can of whatever, are really going to help you guys and continue to help propel this business to not just be in the top 10, but to continue to grow and continue to stay at number one in the NA space. And I can't remember what podcast I was listening to in probably 2021 where I first heard about athletic, and then I was at Whole Foods and I saw the orange and blue case. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize they'd sold that, outside of a D2C environment. And so I'm excited to see where you guys continue to take the business, and I've got high aspirations.
Yeah, I mean, I really think we in the category are just getting started. It's been an incredible growth trajectory for athletic and for non-alcoholic beer at large. But really, when you look at it, it's still about 1.5% of total beer. And all the trends and everything that we're seeing. This could very well be 5-10% of beer in a matter of a few years, let alone 10 to 20%, in the matter of a decade or so. So I think that it seemed, now maybe not so much, so foreign to have NA beer just be that big of a part of the conversation, but it's happening, and all the things that you were talking about, kind of in the background, right? The focus on wellness, the focus on your health, the focus on just being present, and that you want to live your best life, right? I mean, there's so many things outside of CPG, beer or beverage, that are really on a growth trajectory with that. So that's all helping, with these younger generations that are paying a lot more attention to that.
Let me ask you one last question on athletic, and then I've got a couple others I'll pepper you with. And if you can't answer this, A-OK as well. There's so many celebrities, influencers that are on their own respective sober journeys. If there was a, marquee person that you could have hold the athletic can, whether it's in a press conference or walking down the street, who would that be in your head? Who do you think epitomizes what you guys are doing so well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many really great figureheads out there. And a lot of celebrities, no surprise, get into the beverage space. They get in the alcohol world. They see a huge opportunity for that. Um, for me, I think it has to be authentic to what we're doing, right? And I think we've got some really great celebrity investors on our team that have been really prominent figures in backing athletic from the early days. JJ Watt, David Chang, Naomi Osaka, Lance Armstrong, high performing individuals that are really behind athletic and have been, So I think, folks like that are really on our side already, have really breathed and exuded that authenticity from the start. I think it's really, consumers are smart now, right? If you just like put a really well-known celebrity figurehead on a brand and then everything is kind of hollow underneath it, I think consumers really see through that, right? And that's the interesting thing about a consumer nowadays is like they love founder-led companies. They love the story behind it. They love the mission. They want to know the sustainability, the give back efforts, things like being a certified B Corp, things like our Two for the Trails program, where we donate over $2 million annually to national trail and park restoration. Our authenticity from Bill and John's story from the get-go, and really the mission towards that has been a positive force for good in people's lives. Consumers see through that, and they see through that in a positive way with Athletic, and they could see through that in a negative way for other brands that maybe aren't hitting that the right way. So that's how I think of it in terms of the celebrity figurehead piece of it.
No, I like it. I like it. The other kind of point which I wanted to dig in on further was you reaching out to John. Cold outreach is a salesperson like you are my bread and butter, but for a lot of people, they're so nervous just to send that cold DM, that cold LinkedIn message, make the cold call, send that email. I have no problem with the ghosted response or many ghosted responses, and it sounds like you didn't either in reaching out to John. What
Bill.
advice do you have for someone? What was that?
It was Bill from the get-go.
Oh, was it Bill? Okay, well,
Yeah.
with Bill, I mean, takes a lot of persistence, takes a lot of removal of ego. What advice would you have for someone that's sitting on that, typed out message to send to someone that's just not sure if they should send it or not? They're not, they don't have the sales cap on, or not used to what that rejection might be like, or that ghosting might be like. What's just general rule of thumb as you're going about your day to day, whether it's training your other sales team members or just, other folks that are looking to build their network? What advice might you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you don't get what you don't ask for, right? So you got to put yourself out there. And I think that like persistence, it may not always work out the way you're writing it up in your head, but it will be data collection along the way in your journey, right? So like, and that can be applied to sales, that could be applied to really just how you're, approaching your life and maybe manifesting things that you are interested in or excited about. But like, you got to put yourself out there, right? And usually, even if you listen to Bill's story about the cultivation of Athletic, it started with hundreds of phone calls and hundreds of networking opportunities, and all of them, they might not have all been that like landmark moment where it was like, oh, that led me to here. But like if you look back on it, and I'm sure he'd say the same, like you look back on that and it's all like little data bits that you got from each and every one of them. Even if it was not great conversations or adversity, like that ultimately was data that helped you along your journey. And so I would say, like, you definitely don't get what you don't ask for, and you got to put yourself out there, especially if you're in this like curious journey and you don't know where it's ultimately going to land, right? So, that would be my bit of advice is just have a little bit of fearlessness and life is short. Take some chances, have conversations with people, and it will get you to where you're meant to be ultimately.
You keep mentioning both persistence and fearlessness, and I think the combination of those two are dangerous in the best way possible.
Well, but one of the things that I'm a very faith-based person, and I believe that while I talk about like persistence and your ambition and really trying to control those outputs, I also believe in the lack of control, and the idea that like as a man of faith, that is working, and that is more powerful than anything, right? So like I will do my part. I will wake up energetic in the morning and I will put those outputs out there. I'm gonna like have those conversations. I'm going to put myself out there, but ultimately when things go as planned or don't go as planned, I'm going to follow in that, if that makes sense. Right. And if it doesn't go as planned, I go, okay, that was what I had drawn up in my head, but that led me to here. Right. And so I think sometimes when you vocalize that, almost that way of life where it's like everything's meant to be, will be, people can kind of take that as, oh, well, not willing to go out there and control the outputs and not being highly ambitious and all that. And it's like quite the opposite. It's, I'm going to do all that, but I also have that like rest in my heart to know that if something doesn't work out the right way or it pivots to another, end result, then that was what's meant to be. And that's part of the journey, right? That is the journey. And that's what life is all about.
Man, you're preaching to the choir. I've got a clip where I said something exactly, just almost exactly similar, where in building the Reason for Everything podcast and this brand, a lot of times folks are like, oh, like, things are just going to happen to you. And you just sit on your couch and things happen to you. Oh, there's a reason for everything. And exactly what you were saying, like, no, like my idea is like, hey, you have to go out and do your absolute best you can every single day. Give it 100% of whatever you have that day. And the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, he says, if you only have 80% on a day, but you can give that 80%, that's fantastic. And if there are other days where you have 120% to give and you can give that 120%, great. So all I can do every day is just give my best, whatever that best may be. And the rest of it's pretty much out of my control. I can try to, white knuckle the steering wheel and swim upstream as much as I can. But as long as I'm doing my best and floating down that river of life, that's all we really can do. But to your point, it really sometimes gets conflated of, have faith and just sit back and relax versus white knuckling through life and trying to, like I said, swim upstream, when in reality it's this kind of perfect parallel of the two things being simultaneous, which is you can do your best and also just rest easy at night knowing that everything is kind of working for you.
Totally. Yeah, I believe that in all facets of life, truly, and it is a balance. Yeah, but ultimately, it's I think a lot of entrepreneurs would say this, or people, successful people you read books on and everything. It's like some of their darkest days, some of their most adverse moments. That was the birth moment to something like truly special, right? So it's you can't really connect the dots until you're there, right? But for me, that was sobriety, right? That was deciding, hey, 80% of the time drinking was okay, it was fun, good social occasions, fun work dinners, but 20% of the time it wasn't worth it, right? And that 20% of the time as I got older became way too critical, became way too, I had too much to lose at that point. And I thought, when you're younger, I guess you're more of a risk taker. But as I got older, I'm like, this is just that's the one thing I got to change. And as soon as that changed, for me, that was that birth moment where in the time I felt like the cloud was around me, woe is me moment, and didn't see the light there. But now as we've had this conversation, I'm reflecting on it and talking through that. It's yeah, the light was always there, and it was that adversity moment, which is pales in comparison to so many people's challenges and life adversities and everything. So, but that was that moment for me that really opened up beautiful lifestyle changes, beautiful family opportunities, beautiful career opportunities, and I joked, not really joked at the beginning of the conversation about this beer changing my life, but it really did in many ways, because it was the decision. It was like kind of a personal journey that started there, but yeah, it did. It changed my life in so many ways.
I like the way you see the universe, Adam, and as we're rounding out here, recording this on November 20th, we're almost in 2025 somehow. Give me, what are you most excited for personally? What are you most excited for professionally?
And I mean, I think professionally, I think we are just getting started as a brand. There's been incredible achievements that Athletic has made this year in 2024. You can hear about it on How I Built This. You can hear about it on the Wall Street Journal videos and all the trade rags across the beer industry. Like, Athletic is really a point of major conversation and really disrupting in incredibly exciting ways. For the first time this year, became the #1 non-alcoholic beer brand nationally, cracked the top 10 in terms of overall craft beer suppliers by volume. And we are in construction on our third brewery. So we have a Connecticut brewery, our San Diego facility, and purchased a facility across the street from our San Diego facility. So we will have three major brewery facilities up and running in 2025 with capacity up to a million barrels in capacity. So just an incredible future ahead, while stopping to smell the roses of the achievements from this year. But I say all that and knowing that still 2 out of 10 people know who Athletic is. And I'm out here in the community. I go to events, I hand out cans all across the Western region footprint. So whether it's Denver or Seattle or Phoenix or Albuquerque, um, that moment somebody tries an athletic, the light bulb goes off, 'cause even if they were a naysayer of I'd never drink a non-alc beer, what's the point? They try our products and immediately they go, I could weave this into my lifestyle. And so that hasn't stopped. And just knowing that awareness, is still relatively low while we've achieved so much on the volume and growth standpoint, just shows that the runway is absolutely massive. So I think 2025 is going to be our best year yet. And in the years to come, we're clearly investing in a very, very bullish future. So on the athletic front, just really excited about what's to come. On the personal front, I got two young kids at home. I got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we are in a beautiful, precious stage of life. One that is burning it at both ends at many days, and it's so beautiful and it's so challenging. But I would have it no other way. And we live in a great area where I'd like to get out to surf more. So those are goals that I have. Hard to find all the time, but I turn 40 next year. That's a big one, but I've never felt better, and I feel like just in a really great spot, and I'm fortunate for that. So very blessed and excited to continue to grow personally and professionally as I round the corner on the big 4-0.
We're very blessed, man, and excited for your 40th year and what's to come. I'm grateful to the besties for connecting us at the conference 2 months ago, and I'm grateful for your time tonight, man. It was great to chop it up, and excited to keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. It was such an amazing conference. And again, as we were talking about like conversations and like putting yourself out there, like this is such a great example of it, right? Like just running into each other there at a very like thought-provoking, high intellect event and then just exchanging information. Like it's great. Leads to another conversation, hopefully maybe leads to, other folks listening in and getting aware to or getting hip to athletic or getting hip to your podcast and your show. So that's what it's all about.
It really is, man. Appreciate it, and have a great holiday season.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. Great chatting.